Hey guys, I'm back for the second video on my Mattzilla truck here. Now today I'm experimenting a little. You can see here I'm trying to do a little bit more personal while also trying to do some multi-camera. So I've got a GoPro going up over here as well as the normal camera that I shoot with here. I'm also trying to mess around with my audio a little bit. I felt like my audio was a little hollow in a couple of my last videos. So I'm using my Zoom H1 voice recorder. I want to play around with that, and this video is just going to kind of be my test bed for this. I have realized though that the more and more I'm on camera with my face showing, I should probably change up the my favorite hoodie I wear down to the shop. I wear my Team RC crawler hoodie and my Futaba hat whenever I come down here, and it probably looks like I never change clothes. And the beard probably doesn't help the homeless look either. Okay, so to get into the actual build here, you can see here the Mattzilla truck is a roller, sitting on its own feet, shocks, links, whatnot. Now, I went through and did a tutorial video the other day on how to build your own custom links. And I've used that method on this truck here. On here, I've actually used the sleeved all-thread method for most of the links. Now, for now, that's kind of a mock-up. I'll probably try and run it a little bit like that, just to try and make sure that I'm happy with the truck as it sits. Right now, I've got the truck at a 13-inch wheelbase, approximately. Now, when I was originally thinking about it, I was kind of going to go on that 12.5-inch range. But where I ended up liking the clearances on the axles and things like that, it ended up right at 13 inches. One thing is that the front links are longer than the rear. And I didn't do that intentionally, but what I did do is I placed the front axle exactly where I wanted it and then just built the links to that location, so they did come out longer. But what I wanted is I wanted that nice flat approach angle. So the tires and the front of the Stinger pretty much come to the same point. You can actually stand this truck on its nose and it'll just kind of hang there. And that's what a Stinger should do. You can see I have these RC 4-wheel drive two-face tires on there. Now, these are kind of just on there, I'll say for mock-up. These are probably the worst performing tires that I've ran in a long time. I really liked the looks of them though, and that's why I bought them, but they're shallow tread, the compound is hard, they're wide, and I can't actually bring myself to run them anymore. So, for the most part, I just use them for mock-up and like to look at them, and then I take them off and throw something on that actually works. So for the suspension, we're in pretty good shape. Flexes well each way. I've got full up travel in the front and the rear basically. Now one thing is that if you've got the wheels turned and then you articulate, those front tires will start hitting the cage bars. But I'm not too concerned about that because like the crispy build, I'll be throwing the RC Bros Burley tubes in the front of this, which will stretch that front end out to the width of an XR10. And then I'll run the XR10 universal axle shafts, which are crazy strong, tons of steering, and all in all just a great axle shaft for about 30-40 bucks. Since this thing does use a Wraith skid plate, I ended up using a Wraith transmission rather than that transmission out of that RTR Jeep that I was talking about using as a donor. Now the reason I did that is for the rear drive shaft, and I may have been able to clear the back of the skid plate with an AX10, SCX10 style transmission, but I've got a few Wraith transmissions like this laying around, so I decided just to use one of those and throw it in there. So on to the next part of this build, which I've decided this is going to be my Rock Racer or G6 style rig for this year. For the G6, you guys have probably, if any of you have ran one before, you'll know that they strongly recommend a winch. For a winch, I don't run a 3 racing winch or anything like that. I'm going to use my TZI World Beefy winch that I've used in my 2.2 Wraith rigs. Typically, I have come up with a mount, welded it together, and welded it in the chassis or something along those lines. But this truck, being a production chassis, it came from Lou at Mattzilla in this super nice powder coated finish. You know, if it was paint, I wouldn't mind grinding it off, you know, welding on, and then reshooting some paint. But with powder coat, I don't want to mess with it. You know, what I decided is that I'm going to try and fabricate a mount for this thing that bolts into this chassis. When installing my winch, I've ran winches in a bunch of locations. I've ran them back on top of the axial transmission, where you would normally put a servo for a dig unit in a Wraith, but I found issues with that, being that if something ever happens to your line and you have to try and refish that, oh man, it just kills time. So what I want is I want it up front, and It's pretty tight up there though. I need to watch the upper links as they come up during the suspension travel, and then I need to look at where the servo is going to be, and lastly I need to find where that hood panel is going to sit so I don't have this thing, you know, poking up through the hood or something like that, which would look ridiculous. What I need to do is I need to sit this in there, start playing around with some things, find some angles, and really kind of start working around what's going to work best for me. I'm gonna take my truck, I'm gonna take my winch, I'm gonna grab some steel, I'm gonna head into the shop, and I'm gonna start trying to, you know, place this winch somewhere where it's gonna meet all the requirements that I have and bolt into this chassis so that I don't have to mess up that pretty powder coat that Lou put on these things. Alright guys, we're back here in the studio. Winch is all installed now, and it turned out pretty easy. It wasn't that bad at all. It probably only took me, I don't know, still probably took me an hour, a little better, to actually fabricate it. Considering I was moving the camera around and things like that, slowed it down a little bit. But for the most part, it came out pretty much like I was thinking. All in all, it worked out real well. I'm able to get full articulation with about 1/8 of an inch of clearance underneath of the winch. And I've got plenty of clearance until the servo, and I put it right at the top of where the hood will be, so it might touch the hood but it won't need to be protruding through it. At full bump it will hit the bottom of the winch there, but I don't suspect that will be much of an issue for me, so I'm not too worried about that. Now the only problem with this installation that I haven't addressed is a fair lead. I don't have any sort of fair lead up front, and like I said, I don't want to weld to this chassis right now. I mean, I could and I can paint it and all that, but there's something about it that I just don't want to do it. So I think for the meantime, I'm going to run without a fair lead of any sort in the front. I'll end up just looping the line over the car and hooking it on something when I'm not using it, and then when I'm not using it at all, like in this event that I don't assume that I'll be using it, I'm just going to bring the line in tight and put it to or closer to the winch spool itself. So that's my plan for now. That's my project for tonight, guys. Again, I wanted to use this as an experiment to try and do some of this multi-camera stuff. I've got a bunch of cameras laying around. I've got more than a couple GoPros to mess with. I've got my JVC back here. This camera here is my MacBook. So I'm just going to try and play around, try and come up with some stuff that makes my videos a little bit more interesting to watch, or a little bit more personable, or anything like that. I like to hear what people like to see in videos. So if you guys have any suggestions or anything like that that you'd like to see me improve on, or me to do differently, or anything like that, I'd love to hear them. At this point, I'm done with this for tonight. I'm going to head upstairs, get some dinner, edit some video, see what I think this looks like, and keep daydreaming about what I want to do this truck next. So that's all for now, guys. We will see you next time.